Hello, my name is Connor Quinlan, and this is going to be a thorough review on the Nikon D300 camera, which just came out a few weeks ago. Now, I've had this camera for a few weeks, and I've had a lot of time to play with it now. And what I'm going to be doing in this review is I'm going to be going over basically the new features and controls that the D80 has over the D200 and other cameras. And I'm going to be explaining basically what I think about those features, basically my opinion about the camera itself. Now, the first thing that we're going to look at is its size and its build quality and some of its controls and where they're located. Now, when you look at these side by side, and this is the Nikon D300, this is the Nikon D80, you can definitely see a very considerable size difference. The D80 is much smaller than the D300. I was actually surprised at how large the D300 was when it came. And if I turn around to the back, you'll also see another huge size difference back there. You can see how much bigger the back of the D300 is, and when I flip it up like this, you can see that the top is a lot longer too. Now, in terms of build quality, however, the D300 of course wins hands down against like the D80 for instance, but when compared to the D200 they have about the same build quality level. The D300 might be a little more rugged though. It's been tested for a shutter cycle of 150,000 shots, which is 50,000 more shots than the D200 was, so it's definitely more durable and will probably last a little longer. Now, if you compare the build quality to the D80, the build quality of the D300, it's pure magnesium alloy on the inside with rubber gaskets all over the button. So this thing is definitely weatherproof and dustproof as well, unlike the D80, which can get dust in it pretty easily. I am very happy with the build quality of the D300. In fact, I love it a ton. It's such a great upgrade from the D80 in terms of build quality. If you work outside a lot, or if you're in dust and rain and moisture a lot, you'll really respect the D300's great build quality. I definitely know that I have. When we speak about dust a little bit, you think about dust getting on the sensor and stuff. Like when you take off lenses, for instance on the D80, you can get dust on the sensor pretty easily. However, with the D300, it has what's called a self-cleaning sensor unit on the inside of the body. And basically what it does is it vibrates and gets the dust off the sensor automatically. Well, not automatically, but, you know, without having to take a blower and remove it yourself. Now, that's what's basically useful about this, and I have used it a couple times and have seen no problems with it. However, I have read from some people that say it doesn't really work all that well. Now, I can't say for sure because I personally have not gotten any dust whatsoever in my D300. I'm trying my best to keep dust out of the sensor, even if it does have a cleaning sensor unit. So whether or not the cleaning sensor works really well in the D300, I'm not quite sure. Now, when we look at the body of the D300, you will notice that it's actually pretty much the same as the D200 body. Controls are in the same spots. The style is pretty much the same. The only real difference is this little thing up here in front. Now, when we look at the buttons on the D300, you'll notice they're quite large, especially when you compare them to the D80 over here. Now, the usefulness of the buttons being so much larger is that when you're wearing gloves outside in the cold, the bigger buttons make it easier for them to be pressed. Now, I'm going to go on to the inside of the body more. And inside this body of the D300 is the X-Speed image processing engine. Apparently, it's the original concept of Nikon's image processor. And what it does is it basically gives this camera 6 frames per second, 14-bit image processing, and quicker image processing as well. Now, first we're going to start out with the frame rate. And what I'm going to do with the frame rate is compare the frame rates of the D80, the D200, and the D300, so you can hear the differences between them. I'm going to start out with 3 frames per second on the D300, which is the same speed as the D80. And that's what you're going to get with 3 frames per second, which isn't all that fast. Next, we're going to go to the D200 speed. Now you can hear that is definitely quite a bit faster than 3 frames per second. And now finally the D300 speed. That sounds actually quite a bit faster than I would have expected, from 5 to 6 frames per second. So as you can hear, just from the frame rates, the D300 definitely sounds a lot faster than the D200's 5 frames per second. It even sounds a little faster than 6 frames per second. And if you compare this actually to the Canon 40D model, the Canon 40D and the D300 shoot just about the same speed, even though Canon does claim it shoots 6.5 frames per second. The Canon does not quite shoot that fast at all. It shoots more like 6.3 frames per second, and the Nikon shoots even a little over 6 frames per second most times. Next thing that we're going to go on to in the X-Speed image processing is the 14-bit processing on the inside of this camera. Now the 14-bit processing is used in RAW mode, and normally RAW mode uses 12-bit processing, but now Nikon offers 14-bit processing. Now I've looked at these two images closely together, and you'll see that the 14-bit image processing image is slightly better. It has better tone, better grain. It has a little bit better color as well, but there's definitely not that much of a difference. It's definitely not something I would want to use all that much, basically because it takes up so much space on memory cards. It's a lot larger file than just the normal raw 12-bit, almost twice as large. Next thing that we're going to go on to is the D300's autofocus system, which has a whopping 51 autofocus points, which is a huge amount. It's the exact same autofocus system that is found in the new professional D3, which is great. No other normal consumer price digital SLR like the D300 has a professional type autofocus system in the body. The D300 is the only one like that. Now when we compare this to like the autofocus system in the D80 or the D200, you don't see a huge amount of difference in speed necessarily, which is shocking to some people. The D200 and the D80 had the same autofocus system and focus pretty much as fast as the D300. The D300, however, does have a slight edge in darker areas. It does go much faster than those two cameras. But what I'm really pleased about with the autofocus system of the D300 is its accuracy and precision. If I'm shooting with my D80 right here, I definitely see sometimes softer images from bad focusing or whatever. However, everything that I've shot with the D300 has been sharp as a tack. I've compared shots in the exact same spot with the D80 and the D300, and you'll see most of the time the D300 has slightly sharper images due to better focusing, so this is definitely a good sign. Another thing that the focusing of the D300 offers is 3D tracking focusing. Now I've played around with this a little bit, especially with faster moving objects, and I'm pleased to say that this actually works rather well. Now, the only time it really doesn't work that much is if the thing you're focusing on is very small in the frame. It needs to fill up at least, a fourth of the center of the frame to work properly. And if it does do that, it works really well no matter how fast your object is moving. Further out, however, more like it's in the eighth of the frame area, it won't track as well, so you want to be careful with that. You really only want to use 3D tracking if you're pretty close to the subject. While we're talking about autofocus system, the D300 also offers a special feature that no Nikon has offered before till now, and that is AF fine-tuning. Now I've used this a little bit and have surprisingly found that it works really, really well. When I first thought about it, I thought, my Nikon 18 to 200mm lens and 12 to 24mm lens are pretty recent lenses, probably don't need much fine-tuning. However, when I started shooting them and testing out the different areas on the AF fine focus tuning, I noticed that the 18 to 200mm and the 12 to 24mm needed a little bit of fine focusing. Now you're going to find this autofocus fine tuning in the setup menu here, and it's all the way down at the bottom. Right there. When you go to it, you're going to find that it has the value for my 18 to 200mm saved here. There it is right there, and it's number 1, as you can see. And when we go back, you can actually see that the saved value is on +1. Now to set up this thing and to fine-tune your lenses, you actually need to go into Default and go up and down the list and take several pictures ranging from about -3 all the way up to +3. That's how I did it, in other words. And it worked just fine for me. When I compare images, for instance with a lens on the D80 and the same lens on the D300, now when I compare them, the images on the D300 are definitely much sharper because of the great focusing that I can get with its great autofocus and the AF fine-tuning system.